Hello! So today I'm going to be doing my best reads of 2024. Now normally I do two separate videos, a video of my best reads of 2024 and a video of the best books released in 2024. However, I have not read enough books that were released in 2024 in order to kind of put any list together, so I'm just going to stick with the best books I read in 2024. I'm not going to go too in depth with my top 10 list. I'm just going to mention a book, give you a few things that I really liked about it, and then crack on. I'm pretty positive that I have done an individual review for each of the books I'm going to talk about in my top 10 list. So, if you want to know a little bit more, go to the old description box and click on one of the links. Right, let's get cracking. Number 10. So my 10th favourite read of 2024 was Annie Bot. I found this to be a really playful, but yet at times incredibly profound novel about a AI robot sort of navigating the complexities of humanity. It's a quirky novel with a surprising amount of heart. The balance throughout the novel is just perfect. The kind of quirky, humorous insights into humanity also mixed with the complexities of human life and this sort of robot figuring out and trying to understand relationships. Yeah, the balance was just perfect. And finally, it's one of those novels, just like Clara and the Sun, that I think is the perfect balance between sci-fi and literary fiction. I am always looking for novels that kind of skirt that line or create a sort of perfect balance of the two, and I think this novel does that. Number 9. Foster Dade explores the cosmos. This is a nostalgic coming-of-age novel set within an elite boarding school. I think the novel manages to capture the sort of privileged yet very unsettling life at a boarding school. The nostalgic tone might be doing quite a lot of the heavy lifting in this novel when it comes to my personal enjoyment, and your mileage may vary. I'd be really intrigued to know anyone who is maybe kind of like of the younger generation or the much older generation reading this novel and whether they get the same thing from it. However, it is hitting the sweet spot for me, from the technology to the music to the movies, just everything that sort of builds up this world. And the feel of it and the tone of it and the way it made me feel and the way it makes our characters feel, just absolutely nails it. And finally, I really like the intrigue that is in this novel. The entire novel itself is just an account of someone looking into the life of Foster Dade, trying to sort of like build this life, piece this life together from what he can find. And I kind of feel like there's a good amount of intrigue, even though we know where it's kind of leading. The way the narrative builds, yeah, it was intriguing all the way throughout, along with kind of being layered with real emotional complexity that feels like it gets it just right. Number 8. I think it would be impossible for me to not include this novel on my list. How much of an experience it was, even though I am a man and I am not a parent. This was still somewhat of an experience for me, for better or worse, and that is Soldier Sailor. This is a gripping look at motherhood and identity, and it's all told for this sort of poetic yet very, very raw, unflinching prose that just puts it all out there. The honesty is just tuned up to 100, and again, for better or worse, you are getting all the gory details and the beauty of what it's like being a mother of a young child. It's hard for me to go into my likes because everything I've just said kind of sums it up. I thought the prose, the poetic prose that was also very, very raw and honest was wonderful. I thought the whole exploration in itself was beautifully balanced. It is very one-sided from the mother's perspective, but it is a novel from the mother's perspective. So why would she write it in any other way? So one complaint I've seen people have is that, you know, the dad in it gets a bit of a raw deal. He's maybe painted out to be too much of a dickhead. Well, this is a young mother, and in her head with what he's doing and his actions, that's the way he appears to her, and that's what we're getting. And I think, you know, if you're an intelligent reader, you can see the other side of the coin, and maybe actually just in her exhaustion and the emotions she's feeling, that maybe she is overreacting in moments. But we can understand that from the way she balances it. But yeah, and also, like, a final thing I will say is it's very, very funny at times. Very, very funny. I thought going into this, it was going to be like a kind of, a sort of a bit of a tearjerker, a real emotional ride, and at times it kind of is. But really, yeah, it's very funny as well. It's just everything you could want as an honest account of what it's like being a mother to like a newborn up to the age of, I think it's about 4 or 5. Number 7. So I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to cheat big time, everybody, and you're not going to like me, but I am going to add 10 books into my number 7 slot, just because I couldn't be bothered to pick out one, because I enjoyed them all so much. So those of you who follow this channel, I don't know, you watch a lot of what I do, you'll know exactly what's coming. But yeah, I'm going to go for Joe Abercrombie's First Law series. All 10 books. I just had the best time reading all 10 of these books, and they are funny, they are dramatic, they are action-packed, they are political, they are layered. The characterization is some of the best you are ever going to read. No, that's not me being hyperbolic. The characterization is some of the best you are ever going to read. The dialogue is also some of the best you are ever going to read. I'm not kidding you around here. It is the best. So, yeah, and even Joe Abercrombie's worst book in these 10 books, and at some point I am going to get round to doing a little ranking, even his worst book is a 3.5. So even the worst thing he's produced is still very, very good. And yeah, and then I struggled to really be able to pull one or two out. So I was just like, do you know what? My number 7 slot, I'm just going to put the entire series in. So there you go. I'm not going to go into too many details. It would take too long. But number 7 is definitely Joe Abercrombie's First Law series. It's quite light on the fantasy stuff. So if you are into literary fiction and you don't do much fantasy, but you're thinking of sort of like dipping your toe in, then Joe Abercrombie is definitely the person for you to check out. Number 6. In the number 6 slot, we have Hyperion by Dan Simmons. This is an epic sort of sci-fi masterpiece, and I am going to use that word masterpiece because I absolutely loved every single second of this novel. In essence, it's 7 short stories. It's 7 pilgrims on a journey to this sort of enigmatic Shrike kind of creature, and as they're journeying to the Shrike, they are sharing their stories of how they came to be there, and each story has a different sort of tone. One's sort of more detective noir based, one's kind of about fatherhood and being a parent and doing everything you can, one's about war. They really sort of mix up, and each story has its own kind of stylistic way that it is told. You could read this novel and almost feel like it is 7 different authors who have written it. Things I really liked is that it's a very unique take on the Canterbury Tales, and I think one that sort of takes what it needs to from the original source material, but uses it in a really interesting way. I really enjoy its exploration of time, religion, and humanity. All of the stories sort of dabble a little bit in each of these areas, some more than others, but overall, the sort of exploration we get by the end of it, it's just, it's exhaustive. It is so, so good. And finally, I think that Dan Simmons, in just one novel, does an incredible job through the different stories of world building, of creating this universe that feels massive and expansive with its own rules and how everything works. Yet at the same time, every single story is really, really intimate. And that is such a hard thing to do, to make something feel epic and huge, but at the same time, never lose focus of the characters and the story that's being told. Well, that's as good as it gets, and this novel does that. Number 5. In the number 5 spot, we have the first of 2 John Williams novels on this list, but this one is Butcher's Crossing. This novel is a harrowing and raw step into untamed America. In this novel, we have this sort of idealism that completely clashes with the sort of harsh realities of nature. I really loved that this novel, especially at the time it was written, in which westerns were very romantic, this novel, it completely destroys, smashes, challenges, a massive middle finger to the kind of whole romanticized sort of Wild West journey, Wild West tale, Wild West story. As already mentioned, it's raw, it's dark, it's bleak, it is poetic, it is beautiful, and the way John Williams describes the writing, the prose, everything is just stunning. But again, it is a very different take on the Western, but in such a beautiful but brutal way. Number 4. In the number 4 spot, we have Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides. Middlesex is a multi-generational epic that tells the story of Cal. Cal is an intersex person, and this story tells the life of Cal, but also of his grandparents and his parents. It is, of course, rich in themes of identity, family, and history. What I really loved about this novel is just its combination of being able to blend the personal with the historical so well. It also taps into the cultural movements that were taking place in America, in Detroit, as it sort of progresses through time. And it's funny. It's very, very funny and heartwarming, and it packs a punch, and you'll cry and you'll laugh, and you will fall in love with these characters. The way it was written, just everything about it is 5 stars through and through. In fact, I can't stop thinking about this novel, and it was one of the first that I read in 2024. I think it's going to stay with me for a very, 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 very long time to come, and will probably eventually make my favourite novels ever written list. I just love this one. Number 3. In the number 3 spot, we have James by Percival Everett. Of course, there was no surprise that this novel was going to make my favourites of 2024. I think this novel is going to make most people's lists. It was a massive hit. Everyone absolutely loved it. And it's got this kind of universal sort of thing going on in which it doesn't matter what type of reader you are. If you like sort of like beach reads or thrillers or literary fiction or horror or sci-fi, there is something about James and Percival Everett's writing that I think just is so readable, but also so easy for you to understand the complexities within the novel itself, to understand, oh, this is what Percival Everett's doing. Very good. And for those who don't know, James is a retelling of Huckleberry Finn, but from the runaway slave's perspective, James. I found James to be an absolutely fascinating protagonist. The use of code switching and language and the power of the written word sort of shines through in this novel, especially by the end. And I thought that was a really interesting look on what was a slave's most powerful weapon, or what even is humanity's most powerful weapon in the sense of language and the written word. I thought it was a beautiful sort of meditation on writing itself. Just wonderful. Of course, it goes without saying, but Percival Everett's writing style is both incredibly engaging, but also very, very unique, and I just flew through this one. I've recommended this novel to a lot of people, and absolutely everybody who has read it has loved it, and it is without a doubt worthy of being in my top 3 novels of the year. If the other 2 novels I had read hadn't been, just so good, or especially sort of maybe a bit more sort of idiosyncratically unique to me, the other 2 novels, this probably would be in the number 1 spot. But overall, yeah, just a fantastic book. Number 2. In the number 2 spot, I have Rejection by Tony Tulatamuti. Rejection is made up of these short stories that, funny enough, cover rejection. But of course, it's rejection in all of its different forms. And this book did such a wonderful job of just making me sort of like feel things. I don't know how to describe that any better, but just the experiences, it gets under your skin, it gets in your head. I felt incredibly uncomfortable for a lot of it. I felt physically sick at times. I felt sort of a bit squeamish and squirmish, a bit like, it made my skin crawl. But also at the same time, it made me sort of like really empathetic towards the characters, and it made my heart go out to them. It's Tony Tulatamuti is doing so many things at the same time, and I feel like this novel is just a wonderful stamp on what it is like to be in your sort of 20s, and how rejection feels in the 21st century, and what sort of technology and social media, the internet and things like that, has done towards shifting the way that rejection can feel to human beings now, compared to something like, say, in the 60s, 70s, or 80s. It's a very different form of rejection we feel now, and I think this novel should be held up in school. Or you couldn't put this in schools, but should just be held up as a shining example of that shift in rejection in the 21st century. I just thought it was absolutely fantastic. Number 1. Well, of course, if you have been following this channel for a little while, you'll know how much I've been raving about this book. The number 1 spot goes to John Williams' Stoner. This is a quietly sort of powerful novel about the life of William Stoner, a very unassuming and quite gentle academic. It's a book about love, ambition, failure, and the passage of time. I don't think this is just unique to me. I think a lot of people, regardless of age or gender, have a sort of experienced this connection with Stoner in this novel. But I am an academic. I work in academia. I'm a university lecturer. So therefore, like, his life and the sort of the things that he deals with felt very close to home for me. So there was a lot that I could relate to when it came to Stoner the character. And yeah, it's just felt so bloody human. Everything in this story just feels very sort of like profoundly real and relatable. Like, everything felt quite epic in the way it was making me feel and what I was experiencing. But even like the way the prose is written, or the sort of like the journey we're exploring, is incredibly intimate and incredibly straightforward. And there is some sort of magic going on in John Williams's prose, that it couldn't be more simple and easy to read, yet the way it is layered, the way it is structured, what he chooses to include, and the way it builds is just, it's poetic, it's beautiful, it's stunning all the way through. It is some of the best writing I've ever read, really. I found this book to be a masterpiece, without a doubt. And I loved every single minute. I read it, I don't know if I've said this, I read it twice in the space of a week. I read it in 2 days. I think it was 2 days, or maybe it was a single day. I can't remember. I whipped through it, and then I decided to do it on audiobook after that. And yeah, I absolutely adored both experiences. So there you go, that is my top 10 reads of 2024. Of course, I could have gone into a lot more detail with all of those novels. I'm sorry if you were looking for something a little bit more in depth on the sort of plot and what happens. But of course, as I've already mentioned, I have individual reviews for every single one of the books in this list. So please go to the description box and click on one of those, on any of the books you want to find out more about. Yeah, click on one of those and I'll have in-depth reviews of each of them. It's been a pretty stunning year for reading for me. Well, I've read a couple of books that I think probably, or maybe even 3 books, that might make my best books of all time list if I would ever get round to doing that. So yeah, it's been an absolutely incredible year. I hope you're all well. I hope you enjoyed the old holiday break. We're coming up to New Year's. But yeah, I just wanted to say, hope you're well. I hope you had a lovely time over the Christmas period. And please let me know of any books that are your favourites of the year 2024. That's either what you've read in 2024 or could be were released in 2024. Just put them in the old comments below. I'd love to know what are some of your highlights. And by all means, if you have it to hand, whack in your own personal top 10. That would be amazing and we can chat in the comments. But yeah, I think I'm going to leave that there. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're all well and I'll see you all on the next one. Bye.